Yeah, we want to see action. We want to see...
Speaking at the event, the Chief Administrative Secretary, Environment and Forestry, Mohammed Almi, could not insist enough that gone are the days when climate change was a foreign idea, as its ghost has crept into the country and the economy has taken its fair share of hits as a result.
Kenya, like other developing countries, is most vulnerable to the adverse impact of climate change due to high dependence to climate-sensitive agriculture. Increased frequency and intensity of extreme weather events like droughts and floods have hit many regions across the country, across Kenya, and now poses a challenge to the attainment of our Vision 2030 development agenda. The poor, women and children in the various areas are most affected due to their low adaptive capacity. These threats, however, present some opportunities towards innovative and green investments that will be shared during today's discussions.
The CAS further went on to urge Kenyans to stand up and help fight impunity and corruption that has marred the Environment and Forestry Ministry, such as illegal logging, which has enabled climate change to progress to extremely dangerous levels in the country.
For climate change to be actualized, we must stop impunity. We must stop corruption. So I'm asking the civil society in this room and private sector, please come out. Corruption and impunity will not be stopped by a number of prosecutions. There are not enough jails in Kenya, but it will be stopped by enough Kenyans coming out and saying, the good ones who used to shout about corruption, this is the time to come out and say, look, I'm not corrupt and I will not accept. Tell the ones below you, it will not be accepted. For me, that's where the climate change battle will be won. Individual action, and so that the good people come out.
Calls for action did not only stop at the citizenry level. James Murombetsi, officer in charge of the Economic Commission for Africa's African Climate Policy Center, called on both county and national governments to set aside funds to deal with the climate change and emphasized on the county governments to try and access decentralized climate change funds and work in tandem with communities to promote resilient climate-friendly community livelihoods.
One major opportunity which exists is the possibility of accessing decentralized climate finance. Local governments, as we know, are typically closer to communities and are accountable to those communities. If local governments can access decentralized climate finance, they should also be empowered to disburse climate funds for investments in priorities that are chosen with communities in order to support resilient community livelihoods. Community prioritized public goods investments can be managed in transparent, accountable, and cost-effective ways. And such investments are also demonstrated to be consistent with public finance policy, complementary to local government existing budgets, and capable of drawing down and managing climate finance from national climate funds and other sources of climate finance.
He further went on to state that the only way for African countries to achieve their national and global goals, climate change must be factored in and dealt with accordingly.
The African Climate Policy Center, through the ClimDev Africa Initiative, a partnership initiative of the Africa Union Commission, the African Development Bank, and the UN Economic Commission for Africa, is already exploring the climate governance prospects for Africa's structural transformation towards achieving the aspirations of Agenda 2063 and the SDGs. We are keenly aware that climate change is now clearly the major risk in the achievement of the ideals of these development frameworks. And we are in the process of continuing to strengthen our relationships with African member states, as well as developing partnerships with local governments, civil society organizations, and the private sector in order to work towards achieving inclusive responses to the climate challenge.
With the pre-conference event done, counties now have a better understanding heading to the main conference on the role of devolved governments in the transition to low-carbon, climate-resilient economic development. For Brand Plus TV Business News, I am Daisy Wambua.